Hello, everybody. My name is Ann Pizzorusso, and I am here today with Professor Otis Murphy Jr. from the University of Indiana, Jacobs School of Music. And Professor Murphy is the world's best saxophonist. He studied at the University of Georgia and also received his doctorate from the University of Indiana. He participated in many international competitions, winning them all, and has played in over 25 countries, and has received Fulbright scholarships and won the Belgian sax competition. And his curriculum runs miles and miles all in the world of music and especially the sax. So we're very happy to have him here today. And so I just want to say that he's going to be coming to Naples, Italy, to give a master class in sax. And he's going to be doing it at the Music Conservatory of San Pietro a Majella in Naples, which is the oldest music conservatory founded in the early 1500s. And all great musicians, whether it's Mozart, Pergolesi, Wagner, all came to Naples to practice their music and be influenced. So we're just so honored that another great musician is coming to Naples. Professor Murphy, have you ever been to Italy?
Yes, I have been to Italy a few times over the years to different parts of the country, from as far south as Sicily and Bari and the southern part of the mainland. And I've also been to Rome, and I've been to northern Italy. Never to Naples, though. This is the very first time to Naples. Very excited.
Well, Naples is a very vivacious city. And so I think with your saxophone music, you're going to fit right in. So everybody's very happy that you're coming. So let me just ask you a little bit about yourself. What is it that made you choose the sax as your instrument? You had obviously a lot of choices.
Yes, we have a lot of choices. I'm not from a musical family, but my parents were very supportive of music, and they wanted it to be a part of our lives, though. So I had two older sisters who played in wind band, and they played flute and clarinet. And when it came time for me to have the opportunity to start a musical instrument, I naturally selected a wind instrument, and my sisters said the saxophone. So I said, okay, is there a little baby brother? But I'm going to grab my horn. One of the things I really loved about the saxophone, though, was its shape. It's shaped like the letter S, and it has these keys on it, and it's shiny. There's a lot for a little boy to want to get to with the instrument. But that was how I started the saxophone, but it was later that I had an epiphany when I realized I had fallen in love with the sound of the instrument.
So explain that, because that is what I hear from everyone, that it's the sound. And supposedly you can make sounds that you cannot make on other instruments, and there are pardon me, I know nothing about music, halftones or something. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes. The saxophone is very unique in that the saxophone actually has a birth. Most of the instruments we know of today don't have a moment of creation. They just evolved, such as the flute. I mean, you think about if you go back to prehistoric times.
Right.
Flute may have been in existence from a bone that someone blew across, for example, just speaking hypothetically. But the saxophone means sound of sax. Phone as in phonic, O of, and sax. And sax was a person, Adolf Sax. And his father had been an instrument inventor, an instrument maker. And then he inherited those skills, and he was a genius with it. And so he invented this instrument, taking on his name, saxophone, because there were some limitations in the orchestra. So people don't realize this, but the saxophone was invented to play in the symphony orchestra. There was no jazz at that time, but in 1840s that's when he invented it. And at that time, the orchestra had woodwinds, the low woodwinds. They could play fast notes, but they could not project their sound. And then the low brass instruments, tuba, trombone, they could project their sounds very easily, but to play with quickness and agility was more challenging. So he invented the saxophone as a bridge. And so the first saxophones it was a bass saxophone, a low saxophone. And so the saxophone was created to be able to play with projection, but also to be able to play quickly. And so the instrument is made of brass, and it has a fingering system that is like the flute and the clarinet, but especially similar to the flute. And if anyone plays clarinet, the mouthpiece of the saxophone looks awfully similar to the clarinet.
Okay.
See, but the instrument is conical, like an ice cream cone, and it has very large tone holes for its bore. So that enables the saxophone to have a big sound. So the instrument is a hybrid. It's a brass instrument of course, by its construction, but it's very much a woodwind because of how we make our sound. We use a reed and a mouthpiece.
Okay.
Then we also use fingerings like the woodwinds. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background information.
I appreciate that. But that also is very interesting because you talk about, it can make a loud sound, but also I found that, it can make some very, let's put it this way, sensual sounds. That's the only way I can put it. That's like, so what is that all about?
Well, the saxophone, it's a very flexible instrument, and so it's been akin to being described as one of the closest instruments to the human voice. And one reason is because of the flexibility. And on another occasion, I can play and demonstrate something to show some ideas.
Wow.
But you know very well from your own Giuseppe, who was a marvelous saxophonist, and you heard and fell in love with his playing, about the capabilities of this instrument.
Yes, and it seems like the musicians who do embrace the saxophone have this love affair and explain how they are transformed when they're playing. So can you talk a little bit about that? How you just, like, the music almost goes through you.
Right, yes. And, with the saxophone, we use a neck strap, and the neck strap literally connects us to our instrument. And it's very special to me because I can just walk around with no hands on my saxophone all day long when I'm teaching, but it's always there, and I can just pick it up and play at any instant. And so that it's attached to me it literally is. When we play the instrument, the act of blowing, it is part of living. Respiration, the breathing cycle, in and out. And that makes sense to me as a wind instrument. When we play a wind instrument, it's the breathing cycle is kind of reversed, in that when we breathe normally, we take more time on our inhalation than our exhalation. So an example is a sigh. And sigh, please. Yeah. See, you took time bringing air, and then it comes out. See, I took so long coming in, and then it's out. But that is the normal cycle. More time taking air in, less time taking air out. Play a wind instrument is the opposite. We take a fraction of time taking air with the inhalation, and then we play sometimes for more than a minute without breathing. And so it's, just by blowing the air. But playing a wind instrument, it is, and especially saxophone, it is connected to us literally in that way, and it's down to our core as human beings. And for me, when I first heard it wasn't just the sound of the saxophone that I fell in love with. I had my moment, my epiphany, my moment was when I heard the classical saxophone played for the first time. And that, it made the hair stand up on my neck. I literally did not know what instrument I was hearing.
Well, tell us about that. What is a classical saxophone?
Sure, as I mentioned earlier, the instrument was invented to play in the orchestra, and therefore classical instrument. But unfortunately, Anne, at that time in music history, as the instruments were established and as the orchestral repertoire was being standardized, and therefore the instrumentation was being standardized, the saxophone came a little too late. And so we missed that period to become permanent members in the orchestra, unfortunately. This was around the 1840s. So everything was already set. The saxophone was about to just come and go, just into obscurity. But there was an occasion that saved the instrument. And it was that there was a wind band, and in France, it was in the country of France. The French were starting to revamp the instruments of their military bands to consider other options. And so there was a battle of the bands. And yeah, there was a battle of the bands in Paris. And the first band had the normal instruments and the normal everything there. But the other band had some Adolphe Sax instruments. It had other instruments, namely the saxophone. And the band that had the saxophone overwhelmingly won. That ensured the survival of the saxophone right there, because that meant instructors needed to be found and taught to learn to teach the instrument, because it was adopted to become a permanent member in the military band, and that ensured its future. And that is why we have the saxophone, frankly, today, is because of that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, let me ask you this. You're a classical saxophonist. Is there, I don't know, to me, a musician is a musician, right? If you're a good saxophone player, you're a good saxophone player. Is there some sort of hierarchy if you play jazz or rock and roll or classical? I mean, do people snob you or something like that?
I have some... I don't consider myself a jazz musician because I some training in it. I even have part of my doctorate degree is I have a minor in jazz studies. However, I have some friends who are genuine creme de la creme, top in the world in jazz, and that is how I say I know I will do what I can do in my own direction, because they do what they do and they do it so very well. So I think, sure, that exists, but there's no room for that. We're all in this together as jazz and rock and classical, all of it. Right. Saxophone is a saxophone. How we play it, and this goes back to this idea of its incredible flexibility. You mentioned, I said it's like the human voice. The human voice can do so many things. It's so dynamic. The saxophone can too, and that is a demonstration of the instrument's prowess, that it can be used on the concert stage with an orchestra, or I can play with harp. I can play as a soloist with winds. I can play as a soloist with the biggest orchestra. I can go over and play any setting. It's got it all, and that's one of the things. And also, the saxophone being a modern instrument has a lot of repertoire that's being composed by living composers here and now. A lot of the other instruments are playing music exclusively, not exclusively, but predominantly of composers of long ago. The saxophone doesn't have that privilege because we came about so late. We do play older music, but there is a big push as well for more modern music.
Is this in the classical field or in all fields?
In all fields, and certainly in all fields. In my field of classical saxophone, it is very prominently done. There's no question about.
Well, let me ask you this: since is the saxophone sort of used or more accepted in America than other parts of the world, given our jazz heritage?
That's a really good question. The saxophone worldwide. It's used all over the world, and it's accepted very, very much all over the world.
Okay.
Certainly, jazz puts a stamp. It's uniquely American music, but jazz transcends just being American. If you say Gershwin is not a jazz. Perhaps some people say that's not jazz. It's classical music in a kind of popular jazz style, but jazz itself started right here. It started right here in New Orleans in the southern United States with African Americans. It has a long tradition of how it came about, and even how the saxophone fitted into that. And so I think it is a uniquely American music, but it is absolutely worldwide.
Why now?
It's a language that we all can speak and love, and yes, to the core.
Exactly. Well, and just in hearing you speak, and your attachment to your instrument, I just wanted to ask you this. I've seen many musicians, and since I am not a musician, I have found that sometimes a person can be very technically competent. I've seen pianists who don't miss a trick, but it's almost like they're typing. I don't feel anything, but yet I've been to other concerts and seen other musicians, and all of a sudden it's like I get chills, I get goosebumps. I mean, they're emitting some sort of strange energy, voodoo energy. I don't know, but I feel it. And so can you talk a little bit? Is it my imagination? Can you emit these radioactive waves or something? Or is there a difference? Or am I just nuts or what?
That's a really special thing you just said. Yeah, it's about music touching our hearts. As performers, as instrumentalists, we train diligently. In some cases, from like age 2.
Yes.
When musicians start very young, the training is deep and long. We play scales. I play scales every day. I play scales on my own with my students. I'm always working on, I call them the fundamentals.
Yes.
Because it's like an alphabet. Those are the letters that I can then use to make words, to then make paragraphs, to make an essay, to make a book, to make my life, to be able to tell my story, and to be able to tell the story of the music as well. And I think, particularly as students, I very much stress the importance of focusing on the fundamentals, which are on a saxophone. I call them the 5 T's, and they are tone, tuning, tonguing, technique, and timing. And we work on these every day, so that we have these tools ready to go, and they just become a part of us. We cannot think. It has to become muscle memory instinct. So I said the instrument is attached with the stress.
Yes.
Then the ability to play, it has to just be ingrained. And it does not come just by talent for everyone. Talent can make us far, but it comes by hard work as well. Talent and hard work, that's what it's about. And then being able to, the word that comes to my mind is transcend. We need to transcend what the instrument is. This is simply a machine. This instrument I'm holding was invented during the European Industrial Revolution in the mid-1800s, when there were all kinds of great discoveries about technology.
Right.
People were able to mass produce objects. They were able to build smaller materials. There was a lot of like this leap occurred. And so the instrument, because of that, can sound just like a machine. And any musical instrument can.
Okay.
It's the person behind it has to learn to create something from nothing. And that comes from the imagination, comes from years of practice and diligence. I'm so inspired when I hear great artists. So very inspired.
The way you had described it is just amazing. You're taking a machine, an inanimate object, and you're literally breathing life into it. That's astonishing. And then, if you, let's put it this way, breathe it correctly, then that life, that energy gets transmitted to a person listening. I mean, it's very metaphysical. I mean, it's astonishing what you just said. It really, no, it really is, because I never thought of the instrument as a machine, but it is. I mean, when I was saying the pianists were like typists, that's because they didn't manage to emit the energy. And this is quite amazing. And so which brings me to another question. Can music heal us, change our mood? Because, I mean, you hear something, you might be depressed or have a bad day, and all of a sudden, you're hearing that rock and roll music or hearing Mozart, and all of a sudden, you're like, I'm feeling better. Is that possible?
Absolutely, yes. Music is universal. It is, and it is something that I fear here in the United States we are losing at a younger age, because I think we're not providing that opportunity for our students, our children, to really explore and to discover that. And I think it's very important that there is a healing, that element involved in music. And so I have friends I have a wonderful doctor friend who has never played saxophone, who is so incredibly busy, especially after the pandemic. And throughout the pandemic, but after the pandemic, when we've all now returned, and people need him more than ever now.
Right.
And so, he took some saxophone lessons. He wanted to take saxophone to just be able to step away and to just find himself. And he's learning music, and it's for his soul, for his inner peace. And that is what he is using music for. But there's no question that music is able to provide us in a therapeutic way with fulfillment. My children sometimes visit some assisted living facilities. My family, we go and we play music. In fact, once a month. Sometimes we've been doing that for about a year now, for nearly a year. And it's been, the whole point is to simply share and to try to provide something that can uplift, and it's just there's something about these vibrations coming and going. As a wind player, those vibrations that you hear and feel as the listener, they actually they're going out, but they also are coming into my body.
Oh, so you're child.
Let's think about it. I'm getting the joy as well.
Wow. Okay. This is far more interesting than I realized. This is great.